I'm gonna be cooking non-stop for the next 24 hours straight. And during that time, I'll teach you everything I know about cooking. By the end of this video, you'll have the tools to go out and cook anything you want. We'll start with simple but important topics, such as choosing the best equipment and ingredients you should have at home. Then we'll move on to a few basic techniques, such as making brown butter or doing a simple stir fry. And eventually, we'll move on to more exciting and complex dishes, such as shrimp scampi, buttermilk fried chicken, or steak with a red wine reduction sauce. All of this and more is in my new cookbook. This book right here will help you get to the next level. I'll sign a few of the copies for anyone who orders from the link in the description below. And for every pre-order that we get, we're gonna donate 10 meals to those in need through the FarmLink project. It is currently 12 o'clock p.m. on the dot. Let's jump into our first lesson. First up, ingredients and equipment. And make sure to take notes because for me, these are must-have things in your kitchen. The most basic and important tool in cooking is an 8-inch chef's knife. It's the most well-rounded knife you're gonna find. I'll explain a bit more later about my philosophy behind knives, but all you need is an 8-inch chef's knife and a sharpener. And if you've ever stepped foot in a kitchen, I'm sure you've seen something that looks like this. This is called a honing rod. It's not a knife sharpener. What this does is allow the sharpness on the knife to last longer. It doesn't make it any sharper. As you cut, the bottom of the knife will flatten out, and this will pull it back together, but only for so long. Eventually, you'll need to sharpen. Naturally, you'll need something to cut on, which is why I suggest getting a big, nice, heavy wood cutting board. There is some care and maintenance involved, and we'll go into that later, but it's well worth it. I'd also recommend a dishwasher-safe cutting board for cutting any raw meats, fish, poultry, because that way you're not dirtying up this wood cutting board as you cook. To go with every cutting board, you should get a bench scraper. This lets you keep it nice and clean as you cook, and it also comes in handy for a variety of other things, especially with making dough. It's definitely good to splurge on a nice cast iron skillet, but as long as you have one stainless steel pan and a non-stick pan, you should be in good shape. If you plan on cooking lots of meats where you need to reach an internal temperature to make sure it's food safe, you're gonna want an instant read thermometer. They come in all shapes and sizes, so just get one that has good reviews. You're also gonna want a microplane grater, which is gonna help with things like citrus zest and cheese, and what's called a box grater, which I'm sure you've probably seen before. I like to have one of each, especially so I don't have to dirty up my entire box grater when I want to use the small function and instead can just whip out the microplane. If you're gonna be making stocks, soups, and even things like rice before you cook it, you're gonna want a fine mesh strainer. This one right here is called the chinois, and you can use it for any type of straining, but the great thing is, if you make something like a soup, you can get it really silky and smooth when you pass it through here. To finish with equipment, a few classic tools you've probably heard of, such as a metal whisk, a nice and sturdy metal spatula, a pair of metal tongs, which I definitely can't live without in the kitchen, then a nice rimmed baking sheet fitted with a wire rack. This is great for baking, of course, but also for resting hot things after you cook them, such as fried chicken or steak. And last but not least, other what I would call optional appliances. Think a high-powered blender, a butane torch, which is super fun to use, a rice cooker, definitely one of my favorites, and really any other specific equipment you might want. When it comes to ingredients, it's important that you have two different types of oil. First is a high-heat cooking oil. A lot of people use peanut oil, but that can get pretty expensive, so I stick with a simple vegetable oil. And I use enough of it that I buy it in bulk and then stick it in these nice squeeze bottles. The second, olive oil, but make sure it's only extra virgin. That's gonna be the purest, highest quality olive oil you can find, and you can cook with it, but don't go above low to medium temperatures. I prefer to use olive oil as a finishing oil after the food has been cooked. I myself probably buy way too much butter, but it's an important ingredient when it comes to cooking, and you should taste a bunch of different ones to find the brand you like the best. If you want that butter flavor when you cook but don't want it to burn at high temperatures, get yourself some clarified butter. Right here I have a jar of ghee, so if I go and make something like pancakes, I can use the clarified butter the whole time and it's not gonna burn. It's got a much higher smoke point than regular butter. Then of course we have salt, and just like oil, I would suggest you get two types. You can look at kosher salt as your all-purpose salt, sort of like the vegetable oil, and then the nicer flaky salt as your finishing salt, kind of like olive oil. When it comes to seasonings, that's totally up to you. I probably have 400 or 500 seasonings in my kitchen here, and that's just to say how much variety there is. When it comes to pantry staples such as mayonnaise, mustard, soy sauce, ketchup, all those come down to preference as well. I found my favorites just by tasting a bunch of different things, and I'd encourage you to do the same. I use a lot of zest when I cook because it gives the most potent flavor when it comes to citrus, so I always have things like lemon, orange, and lime around. The same way you shouldn't waste a crust on a pizza, don't waste the zest in your citrus. If you want your cooking and food to be fresh, try to keep as many fresh herbs as you can. Wrap these lightly in damp paper towels, throw them in a plastic bag, and keep them in the fridge. They'll last so much longer that way, and I'm telling you right now that one of the easiest things to take your food to the next level is get fresh herbs. When it comes to cheese, never ever buy it freshly grated, unless you absolutely have to. Instead, just buy your cheese in a block, and that way you can grate it yourself, it'll melt even better, and it doesn't come with all those starchy chemicals in the bag either. Last up is a good old rotisserie chicken. I like these because of how versatile they are, but this is more of a preference than anything. I just think that for the price, they're super convenient and they can go a really long way when it comes to cooking. Looks like it's 1 o'clock, time for the next lesson.
Nick's letting me and a couple of other special guests introduce a couple topics throughout the video. Next up is knife skills. They're so important that when I interviewed to be Nick's cameraman, he tested out my knife skills.
When it comes to knife skills, they're very important and they certainly don't have to be intimidating. The first step is to get yourself a nice 8-inch chef's knife and a simple sharpener. There's no need for one of those giant knife blocks. This is practically the only knife I touch much in the kitchen, to the point that I have a drawer full of only chef's knives and nothing else. When it comes to cutting, the first thing to do is to secure your work surface that you're cutting on. The way I do that is simply by adding a damp paper towel right under the board. And that way, it shouldn't move around as I cut. Next is the proper way we hold our knife. This right here is incorrect. You have much less control, and you'll never see a properly trained chef holding a chef's knife like this. What we do is called the pinch grip. Simply take your index finger and thumb and bring it right across the knife like this, where you're pinching the base of the blade of the knife. Then your other 3 fingers should fall naturally behind the handle, and what this will do is make the blade an extension of your hand and arm. Use an empty cutting board and simply do a few practices with slicing your knife. Once you've mastered the way to hold the knife, the next thing I want to talk about is our other hand, the hand that's going to hold the food you'll be cutting. Make it a practice to never ever have your fingers straight out like this. You always want to be making a claw shape with your hand. That goes for anything, anytime you're cutting. The easiest way to spot a beginner is when their hand is like this or like this when cutting. This right here is eventually going to chop a finger off. Instead, if you're using this claw method, keeping that middle finger as the frontmost part that's guiding your knife, you can use it as a guide and you have a much less likely chance of actually cutting your hand. And on top of this, it really does help as a guide to get those perfect knife cuts. You'll also notice that when I cut, I'm not chopping the knife down like this. Instead, I'm rolling the knife forward with each cut. And if sharp, the knife should glide straight through the object you're cutting. We have plenty of exciting things to get through today, and I want to actually start applying these principles to real food soon, but I'll practice just a bit more on this onion so you can see a bit more of the cutting in action.
Nick, you want to hear a fun fact?
No.
You know that onions have 5 times the DNA that humans have?
Using that claw method, I'll slice through the onion, chop off just that top section, and using that rocking motion going forward like I showed you before, we'll gently and carefully get those nice slices of onion. And since I have my finger as a guide, they should be nice and thin and uniform, just like that. There are a variety of different knife cuts that you might hear: small dice, medium dice, large dice, minced, julienne, brunoise, chiffonade. My philosophy is that you can learn these if you want, but at the same time, as long as you know how to use a knife, don't let all of these different terms make cooking confusing for you. If you can cut, you can cut. It's all there is to it. Which brings us to 2 o'clock, time for the next lesson.
We're moving on to brown butter. It's delicious and it allows you to turn butter into something completely new. It's so nutty and fragrant, but it could certainly be a challenge. Just make sure you focus carefully and you get it golden like me.
It took me a long time to learn to make perfect brown butter every time. It's actually something I learned from my grandmother. You have to have a perfect sense of timing and also residual heat, meaning even when you turn off the heat, the pan's still gonna be hot, continuing to cook whatever's in there. All of this has to be taken into account when you're cooking, whether it's butter, chicken, a steak, or anything else. And the reason I like butter is because the butter doesn't lie. If it's perfect golden brown, it's perfect golden brown. There's no in between. The first step is to fire up the heat and add in that butter. If you're being really precise, you can chop the butter up into small bits, because that'll help it melt and brown more evenly, but I've been doing it for long enough that I just throw the whole stick in there. Let it melt over medium or low. I also like something like brown butter because it forces you to focus. You can't walk off and go on your phone. You really have to be present and focusing on what's happening at all times. As it begins to melt, you want to make sure you're constantly moving things around so that nothing sticks and burns. There are many times in cooking where you don't want to be touching anything, and you actually want the food to stick and start to get darker and darker golden brown, such as cooking a steak where you want to leave it and get that nice crust. But because butter is so fine and delicate, it can burn fast enough that you have to be constantly moving it around. What we're actually going to be doing in here is browning the milk solids. If you've ever burned butter, which I'm sure you have, you've seen those little black specks once you burn it, and that's what we're trying to toast right now. But instead of it burning, we're trying to get it perfectly nutty, toasted, and golden brown. When it really starts to foam up like this is when you know you're close. The key is moving things around and trying to see through to the bottom, and the second you see it get light golden brown, take it and toss it off to the side. As I pour, you should see those beautiful golden brown bits falling as the last thing. Those are the milk solids. And as tempted as I am to just drink this as is, you can save this for so many different uses in cooking, some of which we're gonna do later today. And as I lift some up and pour it out like this, you should see that even minutes after it's been cooked, it's perfectly golden brown. If you can teach yourself to make consistently perfect brown butter, it'll help you to understand a lot more than just that in food. By the way, this is just a few hours later, and this is what brown butter looks like after it's been cooled in the fridge. In this section, I want to cook one more thing, toasted pine nuts. Just again to show how you can easily transform the flavor of an ingredient, but also really focusing to make sure you heat it up perfectly and not too much. But before we do that, since that does require tossing the pan like this, I'm going to teach you what's called the sauté snap, not using pine nuts because they're way too expensive to practice with, but using cheese balls. I'm sure you've seen someone doing this at some point, perfectly tossing up vegetables in a pan or whatever else it might be, and it's a skill that you must have in the kitchen. I'll pour in just a few of my cheese balls, covering the bottom of the pan. I love cheese balls. And then it's all about confidence and flicking your wrist. You can definitely start slower, but the goal is to flip the cheese balls over onto themselves each time, with the idea being that if you had something in here that was being cooked, you'd constantly be hitting all sides of it. You can also practice with 2 hands if you'd like, especially since some pans can be quite heavy, but try getting that motion down with something that's cheap and inexpensive like cheese balls. Then once you've gotten experience, you can work your way on up to nicer ingredients. And then all we're left with is introducing the heat.
To everyone watching this, you gotta know how to make a good soup and a good salad. You don't, you really better get it together because it's a life skill that's even easier than tying your shoes or counting to 10. It's 3 p.m. I'm sending you some kick-ass vibes. Get going!
I want to talk about soup and salad together because they're both very simple, which means there's no excuses when it comes to making them delicious. The way I think about them both is balance, and that's a key word in thinking about food as a whole. You need to think about temperatures, textures, flavors, salt, sweetness, acid, seasonality. There are just so many factors that come into play when you think about food, and especially in something as basic as a soup or a salad, you have to make sure you're using all of those to make the best dish that you can. To start with our salad, it's always good to know how to make a simple vinaigrette, and typically that's about 3 parts oil. Here I'm using olive oil to 1 part vinegar. I'm using red wine vinegar. That means if you have 3 tablespoons of oil, you'll have 1 tablespoon of vinegar. After that, I'll add a pinch of salt, a light drizzle of honey, and just a pinch of pepper. Then, whether you're doing this in a mortar and pestle like me or in a blender, you want to keep mixing until it's emulsified, meaning it looks like one consistent mixture. Like I said, we're going for a bunch of different textures and flavors, so I'll start with some simple romaine lettuce, which is nice and light and crispy, a great base for my salad. I even like to think of factors such as color when cooking. If I want peppers in my salad, it's going to be much more appetizing if I have a variety of colors in it. And again, you want to have the same mindset for soup. Even adding something like a little swirl of cream to the top will add not only flavor, but also a nice inviting color on the top of the soup you're about to enjoy. I think we can all agree that this doesn't look quite as good as this. To assemble our salad, I'll add in some of those greens, then toss in some of those peppers, a nice sprinkle of toasted pine nuts, a nice grating of Parmesan cheese. This, by the way, will give us some nice salt, a nice drizzle of our dressing. Manny, you want to taste?
Yeah, sure.
Is it good?
It's actually really good, yeah.
And then to finish, a few of these crostini, which I find to be a lot better than croutons, and I'll break over the top of my salad. That last touch will give us different sizes and textures so that no bite of the salad is the same. You might get a red pepper with a piece of lettuce and a large crostini, or you might get a piece of lettuce with a light coating of cheese, some toasted pine nuts, and some breadcrumbs. You have to keep your food exciting.
Hey there, I'm Kevin from Cook. So since there are quite a few veggies left over from the salad, let's learn how to stir fry. Now, I've made a lot of stir fries. They're very simple and definitely delicious. I always stress the importance of learning the art of stir frying, but I'll let Nick take it from here.
Whether you're a college student, you just have some scraps in your fridge at home, or you just want to make a nice quick meal, a stir fry is always the way to go. That or fried rice, which we'll go into later. The great part about a stir fry, you can use whatever ingredients you want. As I said earlier, I like to have a prep board separate from my wood cutting board. So for things like garlic and onions, when I put them down on here and chop them all up, we have perfectly minced garlic, and that flavor isn't going to stay in our cutting board. Same goes for the onion. Start with a nice wok or really any pan you want. We'll go into the bottom with just a little bit of oil. You want something that has a high smoke point because we're going to cook fast and at a high temperature. First, you want to add in your aromatics, such as the garlic and the onions, the things that are going to really give us that foundational flavor. Stir those around just a bit, adjusting the heat as necessary so they don't burn. And I want you to understand that we wouldn't start with something like a pepper because they'd be all wilted and overcooked by the time we're finished cooking our stir fry. Next up, I have some thinly sliced chicken that I'll toss in. But you can use anything you want here, whether it's chicken, steak, shrimp, or even a vegetarian stir fry. As I cook here, I'm also adjusting the heat up and down as I go because I don't want the garlic and onion to burn. Just like we had to do with the brown butter, you need to focus. Always be on the lookout for that ingredient that could burn first, and just adjust the heat to prevent that from happening. At this point, my chicken is cooked through, so I'm gonna add in some of my peppers from that last lesson, and I'll stir this up just a little bit. As you can see, I'm still using that flicking technique. Once those peppers are lightly softened, although I like to keep mine nice and crunchy, I'll add in a little bit of rice wine vinegar. That is gonna give us the acidity to balance out this dish, as well as a nice splash of soy sauce. That's gonna give us flavor and also the salt that we desperately need. Notice we haven't added any salt until just now. Use these liquids to scrape off all those delicious bits on the bottom of your pan, which are also gonna have tons and tons of flavor. And to finish things off, I'm gonna make what's called a cornstarch slurry. I'm just gonna add a bit of cornstarch to some water, and when it's nice and consistent, I'll drop that right into my stir fry. That cornstarch will thicken up all the liquid in our stir fry and give us a nice, beautiful glaze. It essentially brings your sauce together. Transfer that right away into a bowl, and just take note of that beautiful glaze that we got from the cornstarch and soy sauce and vinegar at the end. This took me no more than just a couple minutes, and I guarantee you, watching this right now, could easily go home and make this. Anytime, anywhere. Oh, 5 o'clock. Time for our next lesson. I'm gonna let Gordon introduce this one.
Now, to be a true master chef, you have to be able to take a stunning bird like this and break it down into all its delicious parts.
After Gordon taught us this, which as you can see I was pretty excited about, I've actually done it several times with a blindfold on. But today I'm gonna guide you through it a bit slower, without a blindfold. Don't try to learn with a blindfold on. Learning how to break down a whole chicken is really important. I'm not saying you have to do it every day, but it'll teach you where all the individual parts of the chicken come from, and you can apply this to many other parts of cooking. To begin, pat your chicken dry. You don't want liquids flying out everywhere as you butcher it. Lay it down on your cutting board, breast side up, and it may look confusing right now, but after we get through a few cuts, you'll start to understand it right away. You're gonna make an incision just to cut the skin inside each leg. That's just gonna help you to see inside for what we're gonna do next. Do that same thing on the other side. Once you've separated that skin and can clearly see inside both of the legs and thighs, you can turn the chicken towards you and holding down the breast, put your whole hand around the thigh and leg on one side and lift and crack. What you're looking to do is dislocate this one bone right here that comes out of the thigh. And after you've done that, you can easily fit your knife right inside there, close it back down, and make a nice cut straight through. And already, right there, we have one leg and one thigh. Flip the chicken around and do the same thing on the other side. Again, all you're looking for is that bone right there to pop out, after which you can fit in your knife and make a clean cut right through. 2 legs and 2 thighs. For the wings, you want to stretch them out like this, and then simply start carving around the wing with your knife, letting the weight of the chicken hang down and do all the work for you. Eventually, your knife should swiftly and easily cut right through that bone there, and just like that, you've taken off a wing. Do the same with the other side. Now, all we have left are the breasts. There's a bone straight through the middle that divides them for you. So all you have to do is start by following that bone on one side, then just continue cutting down, keeping the knife right up against the bone, then eventually you can open it up to give yourself a little bit more visibility and just keep driving the knife along the bone. The goal, of course, is to get as much meat as possible, and eventually off it'll come. And as you can see, there's one clean chicken breast. For the other side, just flip it around and once again, cut along the bone, and eventually you got your second chicken breast. And what you're left with is 2 breasts, 1 carcass, 2 wings, and 2 leg quarters, which includes both the leg and the thigh. And the best part, it's only 5:32. It's 6 o'clock, so we're gonna make stock. It's a great way to get rid of kitchen scraps, and once you know what scraps you can and can't use, it's just about one of the easiest things to make, but it's packed with flavor. To begin, you'll fill a pot just about 3/4 of the way with water. Then we'll go in with our mirepoix, which is simply carrots, celery, and onion. If you ever hear mirepoix, that's what it means. It's just a flavorful trio of those 3 classic vegetables that people use often in stocks and soups. And like I said, it's a good time to use leftovers. So here I have some parsley stems, then one of my favorite ingredients, a few Parmesan cheese rinds. And then in we go with the carcass of a cooked rotisserie chicken, and also the raw carcass of the chicken we just broke down. Then we'll crank up the heat and set it aside. You're gonna wanna check on it every 20 minutes or so and skim off all that foam that appears on the top. That's gonna give you a cloudy stock, and we don't want that. After that, we'll let it cook about 4 or 5 hours, and then we'll have a nice flavorful chicken stock using all these amazing scraps that we've saved up in our fridge from over time. I like to freeze all my scraps over several months and then make one big stock every so often. And you can use whatever bones you want, but make sure to stay away from bitter greens and veggies such as kale, cabbage, artichokes, bok choy. If in doubt, just look it up. And one last thing, don't salt your stock. You're gonna reduce it down at the end, which means we're gonna boil off and let a lot of the water escape, which concentrates the stock and gives us more powerful flavor in smaller amounts of stock. And it's easier for storage, but if you salt it now, it might become way too salty later. You wanna be able to control the seasoning when you go to cook with it. All right, we're doing our first cameraman swap of the night.
Good luck, Kevin. I'm out. I'm getting some sleep.
There are lots of sauces in cooking, but there are a few in particular that you must know. They're called the French mother sauces. And once you learn the foundations, you can apply it to just about anything you can imagine. And that's the beauty of sauces.
Our first sauce is a bechamel. It's the base for many of our favorite foods. Chicken pot pie, mac and cheese. It's a creamy foundational sauce. We'll start by melting down 2 tablespoons of butter. We're doing this over medium heat so the butter doesn't burn, because we want to keep the color of the sauce nice and light and white. In with the butter, we're gonna add 2 tablespoons of flour, and we're making right now what we call a roux. Turn the heat to low and stir constantly until it's evenly mixed up. Once the mixture starts to bubble, add in 1 1/4 cups of hot milk, continuing to whisk, and then you can turn up the heat and bring this to a boil, seasoning it with salt and pepper as it cooks. Once it's thickened up, I'll turn off the heat. As you can probably tell, this process happens pretty quickly. The flour just did exactly what we did earlier with the cornstarch in the stir fry. Any starch like that will thicken up a sauce, and that's how we just achieved this. You can use this as is, or add in about a 1/2 cup of cheese once the heat's off, and stir that right away to melt in all the cheese. You'll now have a really nice thick cheese sauce, and if you added in a bunch of macaroni, you'd have the perfect mac and cheese. If your sauce gets too thick, just add a little bit of water and whisk. And just like that, our bechamel is done. As you know, I'm Italian, so of course you need to have a good tomato sauce. This is one of the simplest things to make. You can either do it by hand or go into a blender with some tomatoes. These are San Marzano tomatoes, which seem to be a standard in a lot of kitchens, but I urge you, no matter what canned tomatoes you're using, to taste. Make sure they have nice acidity, make sure the sugar levels are to your liking, and if not, you can add lemon juice or add sugar or adjust in any way you please. To start, we'll pulse this up a few times. Then we'll set this off to the side, and now into a pan with a drizzle of extra virgin olive oil, some freshly minced garlic. This is one of the best smells that you can create in a kitchen. And once the garlic has gotten nice and aromatic, depending on how spicy you want it to be, go ahead and add in some red pepper flakes. Continue cooking over medium-low heat until the garlic becomes nice and lightly golden brown. Once they're golden brown, pour in the tomato sauce to slow down the cooking. Pouring in those crushed tomatoes will immediately halt the cooking on the garlic, just to make sure they don't go too far over golden brown. At this point, just tear off some fresh basil and simply finish with a little bit of salt and a little bit of freshly cracked black pepper. Optionally, you can add just a little sprinkle of sugar, which will help to cut the acidity of the tomatoes. Once this has been cooking down for about 8 to 10 minutes, our sauce is complete. You can use it with pasta, pizza, or whatever you'd like. Do yourself a favor and never buy that Prego pasta sauce. Also, never buy pasta sauce that's in a plastic bottle. It's not only cheaper, but just tastes so much better to buy a nice can of tomatoes like this and doctor it up with a very inexpensive amount of ingredients, and you'll have a tomato sauce that's 100 times better than one of those cheap can ones. Prego. For our third sauce, we're gonna make a velouté, which means velvet in French. Keep that in mind as you make this one. The start is no different from making our bechamel. We're gonna go into a pan with 3 tablespoons of butter, and then since we're making a roux again, just like the bechamel, since we did 3 tablespoons of butter, we go in with 3 tablespoons of flour. And once again, we'll whisk right away until it becomes consistent and begins to bubble. And once it begins to bubble, we'll slowly add in a little bit of stock until it thickens up again each time, and then continuing to add more, stirring constantly until we've added 2 cups of stock. To finish this off, just add a touch of salt and a little bit of white pepper, since we want to keep that beautiful light color. As you can see, it should eventually become nice and velvety, and is often used just to serve over things like poultry and fish. This sauce is slightly less common, but it's nice to know you can use the same base and then either cream or stock to finish off the sauce. You'll see an application of this type of sauce later in the video. Our final sauce is hollandaise. If you've ever had eggs Benedict, then you know what hollandaise is. And if you haven't, you need to know what hollandaise is. To start, we need 3 egg yolks. And since we haven't yet talked about how to separate an egg, here's the perfect time. First off, when you crack an egg, don't crack it on a sharp surface. Crack it on a flat surface like this. Then, to separate, gently break it open, leaning it towards one side so that the yolk falls into one of the 2 compartments, and then carefully drop it back and forth, filling off all the egg whites until you have egg whites in one bowl and a yolk in the other. You can discard the shells. Once you get really comfortable in the kitchen, you should also learn the one-handed egg crack. It's fun to do when you're cooking fast and cooking often, and you simply hit it against the board and then crack it open with your fingers like this. This right here is another helpful setup in cooking. It's called a double boiler. You only really have to use it on occasion, but instead of providing direct heat, the water from the pot below will steam up the bowl above and slowly and gently cook whatever's in here. So it's perfect for melting chocolate or making something like hollandaise that's very sensitive and easy to overdo. Have your ingredients prepped out, because once you start, you have to move quickly. First, in with our 3 egg yolks, and immediately we'll start whisking as we add in 1 tablespoon of water, 2 tablespoons of lemon juice, a little pinch of salt, and a sprinkle of cayenne pepper. Then we begin tossing in small cubes of a full stick of butter, continuing to whisk until each one has melted in. If the egg begins to get clumpy, turn down the heat immediately and lift the bowl off of the pot temporarily. So we're basically combining the butter and the eggs and slowly cooking those eggs to thicken them. But we are absolutely not looking for scrambled eggs. Make sure not to forget to stir up on the edges as well, because that's when you're gonna start to get scrambled eggs on the sides of your bowl too. Again, if you feel like you can't stir fast enough without your eggs scrambling, just turn down the heat a little bit. Now is the moment where I really see the sauce starting to thicken up. So at this point, I am gonna turn down the heat, continuing to scrape down the sides of the bowl until I have a nice hollandaise sauce. If it gets too thick, simply add a splash of hot water, and you can always use one of those fine strainers we talked about earlier if you have a few clumps of egg in there and want to make it perfect. But as you can see, this one's perfectly smooth. Once you get a nice velvety coating on the back of a spoon, your hollandaise sauce is done.
You better be saving the hollandaise sauce for eggs Benedict later. Speaking of which, you must properly learn how to cook eggs in different ways. Nick, showdown.
We're gonna start by making 4 different types of eggs. Going right off that hollandaise sauce, eggs are versatile and very important, and can certainly teach you a lot about cooking. We're gonna do a poached egg, a fried egg, a boiled egg, and a scrambled egg. To begin, crack your egg into a ramekin, and once your water just barely begins to simmer, add a little splash of vinegar, which will help to tighten everything up when the egg drops in. Then slowly start stirring with a whisk to create a gentle vortex, and then lower in the egg and drop it in the center. That vortex will spin it around and keep it looking nice. After between 2 and 4 minutes, scoop out that egg, adjust the timing based on how firm you want that yolk. And optionally, if you want it to look nice, you can pull off those ugly bits of egg white. What you're left with is a beautiful poached egg. Our second egg is gonna be a simple fried egg. We'll go into a pan with some oil that has a high smoke point, because since we're trying to get those crispy bits on the egg, we need to cook at a high temperature, and butter would burn. Although clarified butter would also be an option here. Once that oil begins to start shimmering, that means it's nice and hot and ready to go. So in we'll go with our egg. Be careful as the egg might start spitting here, and control the temperature so it doesn't start to burn. What you're watching for is some golden brown bits to appear around the edges of the egg. Our goal right now is an egg that's cooked through with a nice crispy edge, and for me, I always want that yolk to still be able to pop. Once the edges are golden brown and crispy, that's our cue to flip the egg over. Make sure you're flipping away from yourself so as not to splatter yourself with oil. And in one swift motion, you'll flip the egg. On this side, we're just looking to cook the rest of the egg whites through, so I'll lightly swirl around the oil to make sure it really gets in there. And after about a minute to 30 seconds in there, our egg is complete. That is one good looking egg. Time to see if we still got that nice yolk. Like that?
That looks so good.
Kevin, I know you like that.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
Our third type of eggs will be scrambled. Into a large bowl, I'll crack in 4 large eggs. Now would be a good time to practice the one-handed egg crack. In fact, I'll give you a slow one-handed egg crack so you can hopefully see how it works. And to that, just for some added color, I'm gonna go ahead and separate out 1 or 2 egg yolks and add those to the mix as well. Like I said, you can use your hands to separate if it's easier. And now whisk them up, but make sure not to over-mix. Then in a non-stick pan over medium heat, we'll add a tablespoon of butter. And once the butter becomes lightly foamy, pour in those eggs, stir continuously, scraping around the entire pan until the eggs begin to clump up. Then reduce the heat to low and continue gently folding the eggs. They should be slightly wet and you really don't want to break them apart all that much. And I'm also going to add just a pinch of salt, a touch of black pepper. Optionally, you can fold in a bit of cream or creme fraiche for some extra creaminess. And oftentimes when I make scrambled eggs, I add in a secret ingredient, but I'm going to keep that one hidden right here in this cookbook. Oh. Time for another cameraman subbing.
While baking certainly isn't for everybody, it's important that you know how to make a simple dough as well as learn the technique of kneading.
Which I'm gonna teach you to do right now. It is 9 p.m. on the dot, and we're gonna make a pizza dough, which we'll come back to later and actually make a pizza with. I'll begin in a bowl with 1 1/3 cups of lukewarm water, to which I'll add 2 1/4 teaspoons of instant yeast, whisking as I pour it in. To this, I'll also add 1 tablespoon of granulated sugar. Yeast, water, and sugar is the start of most dough recipes. And this process is what's gonna allow the yeast to activate and wake up. We'll let this sit for 5 minutes to let the yeast bloom. And at this point, we're gonna add in 2 tablespoons of olive oil, 1 teaspoon of salt, and then begin folding this into our 3 1/2 cups of all-purpose flour. Mix until the dough becomes nice and shaggy, and then with lightly floured hands, go ahead and begin kneading it in the bowl, trying to really push all the dough together as you fold it over itself. Once it's in a ball, lightly flour your work surface, and then place it down over the flour, and then begin kneading by folding the part further from you towards your body, and then pushing down with the ball of your hand, this part right here. Then simply continue this motion, pressing the dough into itself using your weight from above. You should really make sure you nail down a good technique for kneading, because otherwise, depending on how long you're supposed to be kneading for, it can actually get quite tiring. You may need to flour the board again as needed, although the goal is to have the dough just sticky enough that it makes it easy to knead without sticking to the cutting board. Once the dough looks nice and smooth, you can test whether it's ready to rise by gently pressing in a finger and seeing if it lightly bounces back at you. If that happens, you're ready to go. Lightly grease your bowl with just a touch of oil, then add in your dough, and make sure to turn it around on all sides to gently coat. Unlike me, it's time for this dough to get a little bit of rest. I hope you sleep well, buddy.
Nick, why are you making pasta at 10 p.m.? Go to bed. Only you would still be making fresh pasta right now. In all seriousness, it's important to learn how to cook dry pasta the right way, but it's even more important to learn how to make it fresh. Nicholas, show them your ways.
Whether you're cooking dry or fresh pasta, the first thing we always do is salt our water until it tastes like the ocean. You may have already heard someone say this before, but you're likely gonna add a lot more salt than you think you should be adding. The pasta is gonna absorb some of that salt as it cooks, essentially seasoning your pasta in the cooking process. Next, we'll add our pasta, and you should trust your palate over the packaging instructions. Once you feel like the pasta may start being done, go ahead and carefully grab a piece and take a bite of the pasta. You might even hear the crunch, so it's obvious to me that it's not done quite yet, but I'll let it go just a few more minutes. The more you cook, the better your heat tolerance will become as well, but I'll talk about that more shortly. One more taste, and our pasta is perfect al dente. Al dente is essentially when the pasta is just slightly underdone. There's still a little bit of a bite to it at the end. For now, I'm gonna save this because we're using this later. And don't forget, always save a bit of pasta water. We'll explain that later too. You also need to know how to make fresh pasta dough, and I'll show you how to do it with no special equipment whatsoever. To start, go onto a work surface with 2 cups of all-purpose flour, and then using a bowl, make a nice hole in the middle. Into the center, I'll go in with 3 eggs and 2 yolks, and I often like to add just a little drizzle of olive oil. Then, with a fork, break all of those yolks and begin to whisk it all up, trying not to let any of the egg escape outside the well. This is when that bench scraper we talked about earlier comes in handy. If anything escapes, scoop it right back in. Once your eggs are pretty well mixed, you'll slowly start pulling in the flour from the inside edges of the well, mixing that in to get it thicker and thicker. And once that egg mixture is finally thick enough that it's not going to run across the cutting board, transfer over to your bench scraper to do the rest of the work. If you don't have a bench scraper, you can continue using the fork, or you can even jump in right now with your hands. But for now, I'll continue layering it over itself, working all of this flour into the dough. And man, man, there's nothing like a good 10:30 p.m. pasta dough. 10:33. Once the dough becomes a bit more dry, go ahead and start using your hands. We're gonna use that same kneading technique that we just did with pizza dough. Hence why we're doing this right after. Bring all the dough together with your hands, firmly pressing it together, and then slowly begin to start working the dough. But try not to incorporate any additional flour unless you absolutely need it. The dough might feel pretty firm at first, but it's meant to be that way. Once the dough is finally done, nice and smooth, you'll want to cover this in plastic wrap and rest it in the fridge for about 20 to 30 minutes. To make fresh pasta, you can simply take a rolling pin like this and roll that dough out as thin as you can possibly get it. You may have to add some flour once in a while, and then once nice and thin, you can go ahead and cut it in whatever way you'd like. For instance, if you want nice thin pieces of pasta like tagliatelle, simply cut them like this. Or if you want wider, ribbon-like strands, cut them like this. Either way, you'll cook fresh pasta in boiling water until it floats to the top, and then it's done. It's 10:59. I'm pretty happy about that.
Everybody needs to know how to get a crust. Whether it's steak, salmon, chicken, or really anything else, you need to learn how to get that perfect crispy edge. It provides flavor, texture, and so much more.
Before we use something expensive to practice getting a crust, I like to use a potato. When it comes to this, if you can already make brown butter, then you have a good sense of temperature control. But now it gets a little bit more difficult. You have to be very attentive, picking up on the very fine cues that the food is gonna give you to give it exactly what it needs to get that perfect golden brown finish or crust. I'll crank up my heat to medium high, go into my pan with some oil that has a nice high smoke point. Once the oil begins to shimmer, I'll lay my potato away from me and then press down so it's making even contact across its entire surface area. Once that happens, I'll release my hand and turn the heat down just a slight bit so it doesn't burn. And at this point, I don't touch it. It's a waiting game. This is a good area to really practice getting comfortable around a spitting pan. You don't really want that happening often, but little specks of oil are gonna hit you once in a while and you can't be jumping back every time it happens. The best chefs don't even flinch when they're hit by that oil. And eventually you get used to it. It's just a small little kiss on your skin each time. The cues I'm looking for here are the smells. If I smell burning right away, then I know to turn down the heat. I'm also looking around the bottom edges of the potato right by the pan to see if there's any darker colors starting to appear. And as you can see, a beautifully golden brown potato. Just what we're looking for. If you can successfully do a potato, you can do anything. Now it's time for a steak. First, make sure to salt it all over. Probably a little bit more than you'd think to salt, just like the pasta water, and roll it all around the edges to make sure you're coating every last bit of the steak. Next up, some fresh cracked black pepper, once again on both sides of the steak and all around the edges. Then into our cast iron pan, we'll go in with some oil that has a high smoke point. And once that oil begins to shimmer, laying away from me so it doesn't splatter towards me, in we go. Once again, pressing down quickly to make sure we get that full surface area contact. Bring that heat down to medium and let the steak do its thing. Similar to the potato, keep an eye on the edge of the steak. Once in a while, you can even lift it up and peek at it to make sure you're getting that crust. And eventually, once you've achieved that nice crust, go ahead and flip. What this right here means is that I messed up by not fully pressing down the steak in this one area, and it didn't make perfect contact with the pan, so it's not quite as brown as the rest of it. That's a mistake that you can definitely avoid, but overall, it's a really nice looking crust. We are literally cooking steak right now at 11:26 at night. Once that steak has a nice crust on both sides, I'm gonna throw in a big hunk of butter to the other side of the pan, turning down the heat to low at this point so that the butter doesn't burn. And if you've ever heard that term butter base, you're about to see it in action. If you want any aromatics, go ahead and toss in some garlic and perhaps some rosemary. The butter base the steak, which coats it in butter and lets it cook the rest of the way through. Move the aromatics to one section of the pan and move the steak to the other. And from that third section, you're gonna lift the butter and throw it over the top of the steak. This right here is the steak equivalent of taking a nice warm bubble bath. Make sure to flip the steak a couple times at this point to make sure even cooking on both sides. And then we'll move our steak to the side to rest, placing over the top those aromatics, which will continue to seep their flavor down into the steak. Resting a steak, even if it's just for a few minutes, helps to lock in all the juices so that they don't all spill out when you cut it open. If you're just starting out cooking steaks, it's not a bad idea to go ahead and use a thermometer to get a temp. This is reading just above 130 Fahrenheit, which is perfect for medium rare. Now is what I like to call the moment of truth. That right there is a perfectly cooked piece of steak. Delicious. I like my steak right around 135, but either way, nothing tastes better than some 11:30 p.m. steak. That was good. Just before midnight, let's go ahead and check in on our dough, which seems to have risen beautifully. This will be ready for us when we go to make our pizza. And it's time for our midnight reset. I've never cooked for this long, but we're about halfway there. And we're still cooking. The chicken stock's still going in the background, but we're gonna get through a few of the dishes, and I'll link a couple of the pictures from the cookbook, because they are pretty cool. A lot of them are based off the stuff we just cooked, like this beautiful pasta dough image, or these gorgeous scrambled eggs that have that secret ingredient I told you about. But I do have the crispy chicken confit in here, and also my Thai chicken noodle soup. And lastly, I just picked one one of my favorite recipes to show you an image of, what I call the Yoki Gnocchi, which is a dish I created that, in my opinion, is the best dish you can make to secure a second date. If this video gets 100,000 likes, I will later attempt to cook for 100 hours straight, which is about 4 days, to beat the current Guinness World Record of 87 hours. All you have to do if you want to see me try this is go like the video. I'm gonna sign this book here, and also toss in this knife, one of my favorite chef's knives, and I'll send it to somebody who pre-orders the book in the description below in the next couple days. For now, we're just gonna go ahead and neaten up here.
Now it's 1 a.m. and we are ready to talk about kitchen cleanliness.
Sydney and I have known each other for many years, and every week he helps me out with cleaning the kitchen, which is very generous of him. I figured since we're basically halfway through the challenge, we'd show you a couple of the best and easiest cleaning hacks during this section.
First thing, to clean the cutting board, we cut the lemon, and then with lemon juice, with salt, and then we'll remove all the food residue.
So you literally are just rubbing the salt with lemon juice into the board?
Yes, and then let sit for like 5-10 minutes.
So now into the sink?
Yes, with hot water. After we rinse with hot water, will help to get rid of the stains and the odor. So now we use like a dry cloth. For kind of this board, we have oil and board cream.
This is only with a wood cutting board. You have to oil it.
It won't dry or won't crack or anything like that.
Looks brand new.
It does. And we're done.
Wow.
Back to action again. But Nick, don't throw the knife into the cutting board again, so. No. With the lemon that we just used, come to the sink with me. When it starts to smell bad, throw in the sink disposal. Nick, grab me some ice, please.
Okay.
Now we can just throw in there with the lemon.
Okay.
The reason for that is to keep the disposal clean.
And that's just a quick and easy way to make sure that your dish disposal smells good and is clean again. So next up, let's say we have a pan that's pretty dirty. If I move these onions away, they have these big dark black spots. How do I get rid of those?
First thing we could do is to add a little water.
So letting it soak is actually a legitimate cleaning tactic, huh?
It is. Come with me.
Back to the sink.
After that, just rinse. Just make sure you get, the nice stainless steel cleaner to help make your work easier. And then with a sponge, you just scrub and you have your brand new frying pan again.
So for cast iron pan, a lot of people have no idea how to clean that.
For that, we usually use salt, a little bit of water, and then dish soap. And then we just scrub with a harsh sponge, then just give like a quick rinse. Now that you have your cast iron clean, you just make sure it's completely dry.
What happens if it's not dry?
You will rust.
So it's kind of similar to cleaning the cutting board.
Yes, and then you put some oil.
Sydney, that's a good looking cast iron.
A lot of people ask, because of the hot water. In some cities, it makes all the glasses all foggy.
And there's nothing more disgusting than getting like a really foggy wine glass.
Now we're just gonna pour it out.
Hold on, I wanted to drink that.
Oh, Nick, it's 1 a.m. So just pour that. So now we're gonna rinse that. We're gonna use the white vinegar. Now we're gonna use like a microfiber cloth. And then with a hot water, you just rinse, make sure it won't smell vinegar. And then you have no foggy wine glass.
Sydney, thank you for helping us with the cleaning hacks. Can you stick around if we make eggs Benedict?
Yes, definitely.
Oh, dude, it's pouring rain out here.
Eggs Benedict is so delicious, and there's nothing more sexy than a runny yolk either.
So for the eggs Benedict, just like we did earlier, I'm gonna go ahead and add a little bit of vinegar into some boiling water. Then I'll begin stirring around the water to create a vortex, and then go ahead and lower in one of my eggs. Continue stirring gently to keep that vortex, and since I'm making 2 portions here, I can go ahead and add in another egg. To test these, all you have to do is pull them out and poke those yolks. You should be able to tell how cooked through it is, and this is perfect already. Now for my English muffins, into a pan with a hunk of butter, because you can't put in all the effort of making something like eggs Benedict and then serve it on cold, untoasted English muffins. Once our butter gets nice and foamy, I'll toss in my English muffins face down, and you'll notice that as I press each one down, I press it over a big section that has butter and then move it over to its own area. That way the whole thing's gonna get toasted and we're not leaving any part behind. Once the English muffins become lightly toasted, just like this, toss them onto a plate. I like to use smoked salmon as the base. And to finish, we'll place down our eggs, one for me and one for Sydney, and then of course our hollandaise sauce, and then finish them both off with a few chopped chives. Before we make Sydney eat his though, I wanna make sure they're perfect. Oh. Try it.
Perfect.
And now I know how to clean my own pan. You do the eating, I'll do the cleaning today, Sydney. 3 a.m., let me give you a little preface.
Now, we all love grilled cheese. I grew up with it. That was cheese on toast. To do the ultimate grilled cheese with this is a dream come true. Beautiful. Look at that.
No.
Gordon?
We can see that the cheese is not melted.
Whatever you do, don't make grilled cheese like Gordon. That's my best advice when it comes to making grilled cheese. I don't make fun of Gordon often, but don't make a grilled cheese that way. I always like to make a simple homemade tomato soup. So first we go in with 2 tablespoons of butter. And once our butter's melted, we'll go in with about a half a yellow onion, thinly sliced. And once the onions are slightly translucent, in with a can of tomatoes. Those are the same ones we used for the sauce earlier today. Or yesterday. And about 3/4 cup of our chicken stock, which we've been letting go all night. That looks unbelievable. Right here is the power of just making something and letting it do all the work for you. The smell coming off this chicken stock is unbelievable. Then I'll salt to taste and leave this uncovered about 15 to 20 minutes while we make our grilled cheese. For our grilled cheese, I'm gonna go ahead and add some mayonnaise to the outer sides of each slice of bread. We're using some nice sourdough. And then go ahead and paint that all across. This right here is called a pastry brush, and it's a super helpful tool in the kitchen. It might seem weird to put mayonnaise on something like bread, but it makes things super buttery and creamy since mayonnaise is just made of egg yolks and oil. Now we'll go into a pan with about 2 tablespoons of butter and get that melted down. Then we go bread into our pan, mayonnaise side down. That combo of mayonnaise and butter is unbelievable. Then I'll go down with 2 slices of Munster, which is a really good melty cheese, great for grilled cheese, and right in between a bunch of cheddar. I'll carefully flip over the slice of bread to make a sandwich, then turn the heat down, move this to the center, and add on my lid. Once our grilled cheese starts to finish up, I have one last little trick. Move it to the side of the pan, sprinkle down some cheddar cheese about the size of your slice of bread, then flip the sandwich onto it. That right there is a grilled cheese to write home about. To me, this is the true definition of grilled cheese. Finally, to finish off that tomato soup, into a blender we go, and optionally, you can add just a splash of cream and blend it up. Into our bowl goes our soup. Oh my gosh. And like I said, the perfect grilled cheese and tomato soup. But one more time, before we eat it, take a look at that grilled cheese. Nice little dip. I think you can probably practically taste this through the screen. I feel like we should just end the video here.
Hey, Brandon the editor here. Nick let me order some buttermilk fried chicken for lunch today. Yeah, I know, it looks fantastic. I'll let you in on a little secret. You can make it even better at home, all by yourself.
One of my favorite things out there, fried chicken. We'll start with a few chicken drums. Some of those are from the chicken we butchered earlier. Then toss in a few chicken thighs, also some from the chicken we butchered earlier. And I'll then cover these in equal parts buttermilk and equal parts pickle juice. Ah, it's cold. That's not part of the video. If you've ever heard of buttermilk fried chicken, that's what it means. They're brining the chicken in buttermilk, which is this milky and acidic liquid that's gonna give the chicken some flavor, but also break the proteins down in the chicken and make it softer and more tender. And the pickle juice is a nice twist I like to do that gives a little bit of extra flavor. And we're gonna brine this for about half an hour. What time is it?
It's like 4:03.
When you fry, you typically have a wet batter and a dry batter. First, you'll put whatever you're frying in the wet batter, which usually has a flour base, and all that flour can stick to the wet batter. Then you toss it in oil, and it fries and gets that crispy golden brown outside that we all know and love. For our dry batter, 1 cup all-purpose flour, a half cup of potato starch, which is one of my secret ingredients that I talk about in my cookbook for giving extra crispy fried things, 2 tablespoons of cornstarch, a tablespoon of baking powder, 2 tablespoons smoked paprika, a half a tablespoon cayenne pepper, a tablespoon of black pepper, 2 teaspoons of white pepper, 2 teaspoons of garlic powder, 2 teaspoons onion powder, 2 teaspoons dried oregano, and a little pinch of salt. Now whisk it all up. Now here's a fantastic little trick. If you've ever been to Popeyes and had their really crispy fried chicken, this is how they do it. Simply take a few spoonfuls of that wet batter and place it into the dry batter mixture. After a few spoonfuls, start stirring it up and watch it get a little bit clumpy. And finally, to dredge, we simply take our chicken, shake off that excess liquid, and drop it right in the dry batter. Press that chicken down into the dry batter, then flip it over and continue pressing it in there, making sure to coat every nook and cranny. Sometimes I'll even squeeze my chicken a few times to really press the batter in there. And once it begins to look somewhat shaggy like this, your chicken's all set. My oil temp is currently about 375 Fahrenheit, which I want sitting above what we want it to eventually rest at, which is 325, because when I put that cold chicken in there, the temperature's gonna drop. Whenever you're frying like this, make sure not to fill your pot too far up, and then gently lower in your chicken. The goal is perfect crispy fried chicken. Once that chicken reaches an internal temp of 165 Fahrenheit, it's ready to rest. The reason I'm placing it here on a wire resting rack is so that as they cool down, the steam can escape all around the chicken. Whereas if you put it down on a flat surface, the steam is gonna collect under it and make the bottom really soggy. That right there is a perfect piece of fried chicken. By adding some of that wet batter in there, that's how we got all these nice crispy bits that are jumping all off the piece of chicken. The only thing left to do is to taste it. That right there should show you how juicy this chicken really is. Delicious. All right, it's almost 5 a.m. Time for another cameraman swap. See you later. Thank you.
Il prossimo pasto che cuciniamo a shrimp scampi, which literally translates to shrimp.
For the shrimp scampi, we're gonna use that pasta we cooked earlier, but to start, we'll peel and devein 1 pound of shrimp. To peel, you very simply flatten out the shrimp and then just peel off that shell. It should come off fairly easily. Then to take off the tail, you simply pinch the lower part of the tail and it comes right off. To devein, it's easiest if you use a small paring knife, but a chef knife will also work perfectly fine. You simply cut along the back of the shrimp, open up this flap, and remove the gray line that goes through the middle. Now into a bowl with about 4 cups of water, add 3 tablespoons of salt and 2 tablespoons of sugar. Whisk it all to combine, then add in your shrimp. Cover this with plastic wrap and refrigerate for about 10 minutes. Now into a pan with 1 tablespoon of olive oil, then add in the shells, as well as the shrimp heads if you're lucky enough to purchase them with their heads on. We'll saute these for 3 to 4 minutes until they get nice and orange in color. Then we'll add in a few thyme sprigs and then deglaze with 1.5 cups of white wine. Strain this into a medium bowl, which brings us all of that shrimpy flavor, and therefore we're not wasting all those shells. And give it 1 or 2 little presses down to make sure you really get all that juice. This right here is where one of these fine strainers comes into play. Back into the same pan over medium heat, go ahead and add 4 tablespoons of butter and 1 tablespoon of olive oil. Then into that we'll add 6 cloves of minced garlic, about 1/2 teaspoon crushed red pepper flakes depending on how spicy you want it, a little salt and black pepper to taste. Then stir it up until nice and fragrant. I've now strained off the water that the shrimp was poaching in, so I'll add these to the pan and stir them around for just a few minutes, adjusting the heat as necessary. When our shrimp is almost fully cooked, I'll add back in that shrimp and wine mixture, then reduce the heat to low and let that simmer for a few minutes. We've already made a cornstarch slurry once today, and here's where it comes into play once again. We want to thicken up our sauce here, and we haven't incorporated any acid yet, which we want in a seafood dish like this. So I'm going to squeeze in some lemon juice into about 1/2 teaspoon of cornstarch, then mix it all up until it's consistent, and dump that into our scampi. Within seconds, you should see that mixture begin to thicken up and become a bit more velvety. That cornstarch really just needs to activate and start soaking up some of that liquid. If I'm serving scampi with pasta, which many people do, I'm going to add that straight in, and this would be a great time to utilize some of that pasta water we talked about earlier. It adds a bit of flavor as well as some starchiness. Again, just to make a nicer, better sauce. We'll finish it off with some fresh parsley, which I'm just going to tear across the whole top here, and one finishing touch, a little bit of lemon zest. Because as I said, I never like to waste the zest. I like to serve scampi with some crusty bread so that you can really sop up all those extra juices as you eat it. And honestly, I sometimes don't know what's better, the bread with the sauce or the scampi itself. Get some fresh air. Oh, it's getting light out. We've been cooking all night.
6 a.m. I don't know why anyone's making pizza at this hour, but I'm not gonna take a slice, you know? One thing about New York is you just can't pass up a good slice.
I'm sure you all remember our dough from earlier, and I can tell you right now, he got a lot more sleep than I did last night. This has been resting in the fridge for a while. It should start to have that really yeasty, developed smell to it. It is my hope that we get a flavorful, complex pizza dough here. For now, I'll flour my cutting board and lift that dough right onto the board. You can see all those nice little air pockets, and those were created from the yeast. I'll add a bit more flour across the top, and then using my bench scraper, go ahead and cut off a nice portion. We're gonna be making this pizza in a cast iron skillet. But first, I'll take my dough and begin to press it out. When you stretch out pizza dough, you wanna be nice and gentle. It should spread out rather consistently, because at any point if it gets too thin, you'll punch a hole straight through it. Once the dough is nice and flattened out, I'll go ahead and bring in my cast iron pan. Then I'll take some of that brown butter that we made earlier and paint that all around the bottom of my pan. That's gonna give us a delicious flavor and some nice golden brown bubbles on the bottom of our cast iron pizza. I'm also gonna paint this up and around the sides so that nothing sticks. At this point, I'll layer in my dough. It doesn't matter if it looks a little funky around the edges, because those will be hidden once you put all that sauce in. That's what I love about a good cast iron pizza. And then in we go with that delicious spicy tomato sauce we made earlier. I'll spread this across the bottom of my pizza. This is gonna give the pizza so much depth, so much flavor. 100 times better than going and buying a canned pizza sauce. And for caramelization, because these tomatoes have a lot of sugar, I'm actually gonna go all the way around the edge of our cast iron, wedging in a bit of this tomato sauce between the crust of the pizza and the cast iron pan. You'll see what that looks like later, but it's almost gonna be this black, dark, and charred caramelized color. It's a fantastic and easy little trick. But we're not done yet. I'll go ahead and paint the crust with some brown butter as well. You can use this or olive oil, because I feel like everyone forgets about the crust, and you can't forget about the crust. It's such a big part of the pizza, so why not make it exciting to eat? To finish, I'll first go over with some shredded mozzarella cheese, also adding this all around the edges of the pizza so that it gets golden brown and caramelizes with that tomato sauce. And I'll also work in some nice fresh pieces of mozzarella as well. And last but not least, a few pieces of basil scattered evenly across the pizza. Oh, and before I forget, I always like to add a little pinch of salt or some seasoning right around the edge on the crust. Could even be everything bagel seasoning if you want to keep it interesting. This will go into the oven at 400 to 450 Fahrenheit for about 10 to 15 minutes. Here we go. You can finish your cast iron pizza with some fresh basil, and as you can see, it's got these beautifully caramelized edges, which are gonna be nice and crispy, and a nice golden brown bottom. We'll take a nice slice, and as you can see, we got a beautiful airy and light crust, and a nice cheesy golden pizza. The only thing missing from this slice, some pineapple. That pizza is so good. This right here is gonna be my second slice. I'm eating the whole thing.
Niece and nephew, everyone need to know how to make egg fried rice. And Uncle Nick is one of the few people who Uncle Roger trusts to teach you how to make it. Show them, Uncle Nick. Show them.
It is now 7 a.m. A fried rice is simple, and just like a stir fry, you don't necessarily need a wok, but since I have one, we're gonna use it. To start, I'll go in with some pork fat. Once the oil's nice and hot, in we go with a few eggs. Then essentially begin making scrambled eggs. And then on this side of the pan, I'll add some garlic and I'll season it with a bit of white pepper. Then saute that up a little bit as well. I'm sort of doing this all as I go, and the great thing about fried rice is that it gives you a lot of freedom to cook in whatever way you'd like. It's one of those dishes that often uses up a lot of leftovers, just like a stir fry, but then becomes a fantastic dish on its own. Once our egg is cooked, I have here some cold, dry leftover rice. The reason we like to use leftover rice is because it gets a little bit drier and crumblier, which is a bit better for fried rice. You don't want anything too soft and fluffy. I'm not really giving you specific amounts for this because you should really be eyeballing things as you go. Optionally, now is when you could add a little bit of MSG, which a lot of people do. And at this point, we'll add the soy sauce, which traditionally you add to the edge of the pan so it sizzles as it falls down. That's gonna give us all of our salt content in our fried rice. Hence why we haven't added any salt yet. If you're adding a protein like chicken, shrimp, pork, whatever, oftentimes you'll cook that at first, then set it aside and make the fried rice as I just showed you and add it in now. But we have some leftover shrimp from our shrimp scampi. For flavor, I'm also gonna add in a drizzle of sesame oil, finish off the fried rice with fresh scallions or green onions, and just like that, we've made a simple, easy shrimp fried rice. For a while, I was powering through and I wasn't that tired and I just hit a wall.
Whether it's Taco Tuesday or you're just craving some good tacos, you should know how to make good taco spread. It's simple, fresh, and delicious.
I need it now.
Get up. We're making fish tacos. Get up.
We're gonna start by making a simple crema for our fish tacos, basically just a flavored sour cream. So the base will be sour cream. Oh, that sounded bad. Then follow this with a little bit of mayonnaise, and you'll see at this point that I'm really not giving full ingredients as much anymore, because this is when I really want you to just start cooking with your gut, using whatever amounts of the ingredients in proportions that correspond to how much you like those ingredients. I'll go in now with a few dashes of hot sauce, a nice squeeze of lime juice, a touch of garlic powder, and really any other spices or seasonings you want. Mix this all together and set it aside. For fish tacos, you typically want to use a nice white fish, and here I have tilapia. To start, I'll slice them both down the middle, one of the reasons being the fact that this piece here is a lot thinner and will cook a lot faster than this thicker piece here. And in addition, this is a more reasonable size that you put in a taco. To season them, I'll go over with some cumin, then some cayenne pepper, and to finish, just a little bit of salt and some fresh cracked black pepper. And make sure to hit all sides of both pieces of fish. To cook the fish, I want that butter flavor with this one, but I also want to cook it high enough that I get a nice crust on the fish. So that's when I'm going to use some ghee. It's that clarified butter we talked about that doesn't have any of those milk solids that'll burn on us. Once the butter's nice and hot, in goes our fish. And we haven't talked much yet about overcrowding a pan, but this is where it can come into play. Especially if you're trying to get something nice and crispy, there's got to be ample space between every piece so that the steam can escape. Once you begin to see the fish change color around the edges, you can go ahead and start flipping. And as you can see, we have a beautiful, nice golden brown color to this piece already. And I flipped this one first because it's a lot thinner, and like I said, will cook faster. I'll flip this piece next since that's the first piece of fish I put down and it's been cooking the longest. And finally, I'll go to this one here. I'm using a non-stick pan here, but something like this would be rather difficult in a stainless steel pan. Because we're cooking the fish for such a short amount of time, it would probably stick. If you're just learning to cook, one of the best ways to know if your fish is done is just to take one of the pieces as a tester and go ahead and open it up with a fork to see if it's flaky quite yet. I love purple cabbage with fish tacos, or any tacos for that matter. To assemble our tacos, I'll slice up some avocado. This is definitely the most satisfying way to do it. Then into a warm corn tortilla, I'll add some purple cabbage, then a piece of fish, some of our avocado, some thinly sliced red onion, a little squeeze of fresh lime juice, a nice dollop of our crema, and then finish with just a bit of cilantro and some cotija cheese. And that right there is a simple, perfect fish taco. I'm glad you stopped me from taking that nap just now. What time is it again?
It's about 9.
Fish tacos are a good breakfast.
Creamy Tuscan chicken is undeniably tasty, and it's something everyone should know how to make.
We're almost all the way through the challenge, and I hope you've learned something. But either way, you're gonna wanna stick around for this creamy Tuscan chicken. To start, 1 tablespoon of butter, followed by 1 tablespoon of olive oil, and then in go our 2 seasoned chicken breasts, which are gonna cook for a couple minutes on each side. After they've cooked about 3 to 5 minutes per side, go ahead and flip. They should be nice and golden brown. Transfer the chicken to a cutting board, then into the same pan with 8 ounces of brown mushrooms, and saute those about 5 minutes or until nice and cooked through. Then we'll go in with a 1/4 cup of chopped sun-dried tomatoes, my least favorite food, along with a 1/4 cup of chopped green onions, and then in with 3 cloves of minced garlic. And once the garlic becomes fragrant, add in 1½ cups of heavy cream. Bring it down to a light boil and add in 1/2 cup grated Parmesan cheese, then stir that in until well combined, then add 2 cups of baby spinach until wilted. Then to finish, add back the chicken and let that sit at a low simmer until the chicken is cooked through. Finish it off with a few chives and your Tuscan chicken is done. Might be the best thing we made all day. Our final savory dish of the day is gonna be a special treat here. When you talk about cooking, there's savory and sweet. Sweets are basically desserts, and savory is anything that's not sweet. We're gonna be making a lobster roll, but there's one problem. I don't yet have any lobsters. And I'm waiting on a special guest, and I'm not quite sure he's gonna make it today because the weather outside is
Hey, it was nasty out there. Did we make it on time today? Hey, it's Captain Kurt here from up in Maine. This lesson will be lobster rolls.
But more generally, I want you to take from one of these last lessons here something very simple but extremely important in food. And that's to get high quality ingredients and know exactly where your food comes from. If you understand where your food comes from, you're gonna get much, much higher quality ingredients. And at the end of the day, you'll just be eating better food.
Happy cooking.
This guy's grabbing onto me. He likes me.
Take the bands off, it gets even more interesting.
Well, we got the lobsters in time after all. And given I'm from New England, I actually think it's a fun thing to teach people and a great thing for people to understand and learn. The first thing a lot of people do say to do is crack straight through the lobster's head, right between the eyes, which will kill it instantly and hopefully not give the lobster any pain when you go to cook it. Now we want to steam our lobster, so in it goes, and we'll cover it with a lid. Based on the size of the lobster, the timing will vary, but I've cooked enough lobsters now to be able to eyeball it when it's done. Typically, I steam it between 12 and 15 minutes. While our lobster steams, we're gonna work on the bun. I like to do mine slightly differently than most people. First, I chop off each end, and then I slice down the sides. This will all make sense in just a minute. Then, simply slice down the middle to make a nice little spot to put our lobster later. I'm gonna paint down the sides once again with mayonnaise, the same thing we did with the grilled cheese, and place it onto a hot pan. Toast that until it's golden brown on one side, then flip and do the same on the other. Once our lobster's finished steaming, we're gonna place it down on the cutting board, and at this point, you may wanna hit it with a rinse of cold water because it's gonna be quite hot, and you don't want it to overcook. When it comes to removing the lobster meat, I'll first peel off the tail, then flatten out the tail, insert an upside down fork into the bottom, and leverage it out. To make sure you're not wasting any meat, you can also pull off all these individual pieces at the end of the tail. Next, we'll break off the claws, and I start each one by cracking off the smaller piece, then breaking through all the joints, and eventually your claw should slip right out. That's a perfect, cute lobster claw. And it's always satisfying when you get it out in one piece. Make sure to get lobster out of all the joints as well, because these little nuggets of meat are some of the best you'll taste. Repeat the same thing on the other side. You can also find little morsels of meat in the head and eat the meat out of these little claws here. For the head, I'll crack it right off. Then I'll put my thumbs through the middle of the carcass and crack it open. And in here is loads of meat. I'm gonna finish this very simply with just a bit of mayonnaise and a very light squeeze of lemon. Sometimes I like to add just a pinch of salt too. This is a fantastic example of letting the ingredients speak for themselves. Captain Kurt literally caught this lobster hours ago, right around the time we were cooking our shrimp scampi earlier this morning. And now, here it is, fresh and going straight into our lobster roll. It doesn't get any better than this. I'll finish this with a light dusting of chives, and our lobster roll is complete. Oh man.
Nick, can I have a bite?
No. You can buy the cookbook and make the one that's in there. I did make a slightly simplified version today, but this is what you're looking at if you get the book.
Nick, you are almost done with the 24-hour challenge, and there is no better way to finish it off than with a warm plate of cookies. And when it comes to cookies, I know you're just like me. You don't mess around.
I probably shouldn't be leaking this cookie recipe out of my book here, but it's honestly so good that I figure why not just share it with everybody no matter what. You probably remember our brown butter from earlier, and I made some more in this pan to really show you what it looks like. Here we have 2 sticks of brown butter, which is exactly 1 cup. As I heat up the edges, we'll be able to loosen it up. We're using 2 sticks or 1 cup of cold brown butter. What I should have right here is a giant disc of beautifully golden brown butter. Then 1 cup of brown sugar, a ½ cup of granulated white sugar, and 1 teaspoon of homemade vanilla extract. You gotta make your own vanilla extract. Charles here just turned 2 years old. Then cream the butters and sugars together for about 4 minutes. Once the sugars are lighter in color like this, we'll let it continue mixing and crack in 2 eggs, 1 at a time, and 1 additional yolk. Then I'll go in with 1½ cups of cake flour, which you can easily make at home if you don't have it, 1½ cups of regular flour, a teaspoon of cornstarch, 3/4 teaspoon baking soda, and 3/4 teaspoon salt. Once again, mix it until combined. Then by hand, crush in 8 ounces of milk chocolate. The reason I do this instead of chocolate chips at first is to get varying pieces of chocolate sticking in and out of the cookies. Once again, just really thinking about texture as I cook. Next is 1/2 cup of bittersweet chocolate chips. This gives a little bit of a richer flavor in your cookies. And last but not least, about 2 cups of chopped walnuts. You can do more or less if you'd like. Mix this all together until just combined. This makes about 8 large cookies and they don't spread very much. The goal of these cookies is to keep them nice and tall, based on your preferences for how gooey you want them and all the differences between every oven. These go in the oven for about 8 to 12 minutes at 415 Fahrenheit. The cookies are complete, and as you can tell, they didn't spread all that much. They almost sort of look like scones. As we finish up this 24-hour cooking challenge, I really wanted to finish things off on a sweet note with these. Now that we're approaching 12 p.m., a full 24 hours after we started this video and challenge, I've never been happier to open up a good-looking cookie. As you can see, I've gone for gooey on the inside and nice and cooked on the outside, hence the very specific oven temperature of 415 Fahrenheit. I'm gonna go ahead and open up just a few more of these bad boys, because it never gets old. That right there is exactly why I do the chocolate the way that I do it. The inside of each cookie that we break open is gonna be completely different. I've worked so hard for this bite of cookie. It was so worth it. We finished the cookies. We just made it 24 hours straight of cooking, but perhaps more importantly, I hope you learned something. I'm gonna quickly finish with some spark notes. A really quick summary of what we learned today so you can take it away and it'll be fresh in your mind. And especially if you made it this far, great job. I know you didn't have to actually sit through the full 24 hours, but it was still a lot to get through. We nailed all the basics today, talking about equipment, ingredients, and knife skills. Just remember, learn the pinch grip and use the claw with your fingers when you cut. We did a few basic but necessary techniques such as making brown butter or even learning how to cook an egg. Finally, in the wee hours of the morning, we brought together all of those techniques and made a wide variety of dishes that I hope taught you something and are also recipes that you can easily take home and replicate. They're all some of my favorites. Don't forget to subscribe and like the video if you want us to do the 100-hour cooking challenge. We can do something like this, but for 4 days straight. All boiled down into one fun and exciting video. And don't forget, to somebody random anywhere in the world who orders the cookbook from the link in the description below, you will get this signed book and one of my favorite chef's knives. This one right here. Chef's knives really don't get much cooler than this. And for all my US fans, Barnes & Noble is gonna carry an exclusive signed edition, but it is very limited, so grab your copy while you can. For everybody else, don't worry, because there'll be more opportunities to get a signed book. I'm going on a book tour next year and we'll be doing a variety of book signing events, and I just might be coming to a city near you. Go DM me the word cook on Instagram to stay in the loop. Bye, I'm gonna go to bed.
Hey, I'm ready for my shift.
Hey, I actually like the new guys better, so you're all set. You can go back to bed. Yeah, you're all set.